She arrived earlier than she was asked to, not because she was eager to be seen, but because she didn't want to be noticed at all. The place was already busy. Chairs were being moved, cables adjusted, quiet instructions passed from one person to another. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they belonged. She did not. She stood near the entrance for a moment, holding her bag close, watching people walk past her without really seeing her. This was not the first time she felt like this. Being present but overlooked had become familiar. She had learned long ago how to stay calm in such moments, how to make herself small without shrinking inside. She waited until someone finally noticed her and asked who she was there for. When she explained, the response was polite but distant, as if her role had already been decided before she even spoke. She was guided to the side, away from the center. While others were introduced warmly, her instructions were short and careful. They told her not to worry, not to stress, and most importantly, to keep things simple. They said it kindly, but the meaning was clear. She was not expected to impress. She was not expected to stand out. She was only there to fill a gap. She nodded and thanked them. She did not argue or explain. She had learned that explaining herself rarely changed anything. Instead, she listened. She noticed how people spoke to her differently than they spoke to others, with less excitement, less curiosity, less belief. None of it was cruel, but it was heavy all the same. As she moved to the area prepared for her, she could hear quiet conversations around her. Some people were talking about the schedule, others about how the day might go. A few glanced in her direction, then looked away. Their faces showed no interest, no concern. To them, she was not important enough to wonder about. She placed her bag down carefully and sat for a moment. Inside her bag were things that mattered deeply to her, though no one else would guess it. Objects that had been with her through years of effort, doubt, and long nights of practice. She didn't touch them yet. She simply rested her hands on her knees and waited. Her mind wandered. Not to the present moment, but to many moments before this one. She remembered being told similar things in the past. Keep it short. Keep it easy. Don't try too hard. Don't do more than what's asked. Those words had followed her for years, spoken by different people in different places. Always with the same quiet message beneath them, she had once believed those words. She had taken them as truth, as limits she was not meant to cross. Over time, though, she had learned something important. Being told to keep things simple was often more about other people's comfort than her own ability. Still, she never fought back. She simply listened, waited, and learned. Around her, the space slowly filled. Seats were taken. Soft noise grew into steady sound. People greeted one another with confidence and familiarity. She watched them not with envy, but with interest. She liked observing people. It helped her understand them. It helped her stay grounded. Someone walked past her and asked if she was ready. She answered yes, even though no one had really asked what ready meant to her. Ready was not something she felt in a moment. It was something she carried with her, built slowly over time, through effort that no one else had seen. She stood and adjusted her clothing, simple and clean. Nothing about her appearance asked for attention. That was intentional. She had learned that when people expected little, they watched less closely. That gave her space to breathe. Space to think. As she waited, she listened to the sounds around her. Each sound reminded her where she was and why she was there. She told herself not to rush, not to worry. She reminded herself that she did not need approval to exist in that space. She had earned her place, even if no one else recognized it yet. She noticed how time moved strangely in moments like this. It felt slow and fast at the same time. Every second stretched, but the bigger moment seemed to rush toward her without warning. She focused on her breathing, steady and quiet. Someone repeated the instruction once more as they passed by. Keep it simple. She smiled politely. Inside, she felt neither anger nor fear, only clarity. She knew exactly what those words meant to others, and she knew what they meant to her. Simple did not mean empty. Simple did not mean weak. Simple to her had always been the foundation. It was where everything strong began. She had spent years understanding that difference. even when no one else bothered to. She thought about all the times she had practiced when no one was watching. The early mornings, the late nights, the mistakes she made when she was alone, learning from them slowly. None of that had been simple. But it had shaped her into someone who could make difficult things feel effortless. She remained quiet as others prepared. She did not try to join conversations or draw attention to herself. That had never been her way. She believed that actions spoke more honestly than words. And when the moment came, she trusted herself to speak through what she did, not what she said. As the room settled and the noise softened, she felt a calm settle inside her as well. It was familiar, like an old friend. This calm always came before important moments, reminding her that she was exactly where she needed to be. No one in the room knew her story. They didn't know where she came from, or how many times she had been told she was not enough. They didn't know how many doors had quietly closed in front of her, and she did not need them to know. Not yet. She waited for the signal that it was almost time. Her hands were steady. Her thoughts were clear. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing for certain. She would not waste the moment she had been given, no matter how small others believed it to be. The instruction to keep it simple echoed in her mind one last time. But it no longer felt like a limit. It felt like a starting point. And as she took one slow breath and prepared to step forward, the room remained unaware that everything they assumed about her was about to be quietly tested. The waiting felt longer than she expected. Time did not move in a straight line anymore. It stretched and folded in strange ways, shaped by the quiet tension in the room. She stayed where she was, standing just outside the main area, listening to everything and saying nothing. This space between being unseen and being called forward was familiar to her. It was where she had spent much of her life. People continued to move around her with purpose. Some carried papers, others checked equipment. A few laughed softly as if this was just another ordinary day. To them, it probably was. To her, it felt heavier. Not because she was nervous, but because moments like this always reminded her how easy it was for others to decide your value. Before you ever had a chance to show it, she noticed how instructions were given. Clear and confident to some, careful and basic to her. Each time someone spoke to her, the tone was gentle but distant, like they were afraid to expect too much. She didn't take it personally anymore. She had learned that people often protect their own beliefs. More than they seek the truth. She leaned slightly against the wall, letting her body rest while her mind stayed alert. She watched the room slowly settle into its shape. Seats filled. Voices lowered. Attention shifted toward the front. Whatever was about to happen was becoming real now. There was no turning back. Her thoughts drifted again, this time to the long path that led her here. It had never been a straight road. There were pauses, detours, and moments where she almost stopped completely. She remembered times when she questioned herself in silence, wondering if all the effort was worth it. When recognition never came, there were days when she practiced alone while others moved forward more quickly. Days when she wondered if she was invisible by choice or by design. But even then she kept going. Not because she believed someone would eventually notice, but because stopping would mean letting go of a part of herself. She wasn't willing to lose. A quiet signal passed through the room. A small change in movement, a shift in energy. She sensed it before anyone spoke to her. Something was about to begin. She straightened slightly, adjusting her posture without thinking about it. Her body knew what to do before her mind caught up. Someone approached her again, reminding her of the timing. Their words were short and careful. They repeated the same idea once more, that she should keep it simple and not take too much time. She listened politely, thanked them, and watched them walk away. The words stayed with her, but they no longer carried weight. She closed her eyes briefly, not to escape, but to focus. In that quiet moment, she reminded herself why she was there. Not to prove anyone wrong, not to earn approval, but to be honest with herself. That had always mattered more. Around her, the atmosphere changed. The room grew quieter. Even the smallest sounds seemed louder now. A chair shifting. A soft cough. A breath taken too quickly. She felt the collective attention of the space narrowing. Though it was not yet directed at her, she thought about how people often misunderstood calm for weakness, how silence was mistaken for uncertainty. She had lived with those assumptions for years. They no longer surprised her. In fact, they often gave her an advantage. When people expected little, they were rarely prepared for more. She adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder, feeling its familiar weight. It grounded her. It reminded her of where she came from and what she carried within her. Everything she needed was already there. Nothing else was required. She noticed a few people glance at her again, curiosity flickering briefly across their faces before fading. To them, she was still a question mark, an unknown, someone easy to overlook. She accepted that without resentment. Her breathing slowed naturally. Each breath felt steady and controlled. She had trained herself to find this rhythm in moments of pressure. It was not something she learned overnight. It came from facing fear quietly, again and again, till fear lost its power. She thought about the many times she had been told she was doing too much, or not enough, or simply the wrong thing. The advice always changed, but the doubt behind it stayed the same. Over time, she learned to listen carefully, not to the words themselves, but to what felt true. The room was nearly silent now. Whatever was happening before her turn was coming to an end. She felt the moment approaching like a slow wave, steady and unavoidable. Her heart rate remained calm. This was not new to her. Pressure had been her companion for a long time. She remembered a moment years ago when she almost gave up. It had been after another quiet rejection, another polite dismissal. She had sat alone then, too, wondering if effort without recognition had any meaning. That was the night she decided her work would never depend on who was watching. That decision had changed everything. It allowed her to grow without fear, to improve without rushing, to build something solid instead of something loud. That quiet strength had carried her through moments like this one. A small movement caught her attention. Someone at the front gestured in her direction. Not yet a call, but soon. She nodded slightly, acknowledging the signal. Her body responded before her thoughts could interfere. She took one step forward, then stopped, waiting for the right moment. She did not want to rush or hesitate. She wanted to move with intention. That had always been her way. As she waited, she noticed how the room seemed to hold its breath. Even those who had not paid attention to her before now sensed that something was about to change. The shift was subtle, but real. She reflected briefly on how often people misunderstood preparation. They thought it looked like confidence or boldness or loud belief. For her, preparation looked like patience, like quiet consistency, like choosing to continue even when no one noticed. The signal came more clearly this time. It was almost time. She felt no rush of excitement, no wave of fear, only focus, clear and steady. She placed her bag down carefully, exactly where she knew it would be safe. She took one more breath, deep but relaxed. She did not need to remind herself what to do. Her body and mind were aligned now. Whatever happened next would come naturally as she prepared to step forward. She was aware that many people still expected very little from her. That knowledge no longer bothered her. It felt neutral, almost comforting. She understood something they did not yet see. That being underestimated had given her room to grow, space to prepare, and freedom to be herself without pressure. And as she finally moved toward the center, calm and unhurried, the quiet room remained unaware that the moment they thought would pass unnoticed was about to leave a lasting impression. She stepped into the open space slowly, not because she was unsure, but because she wanted to feel the moment fully. Every step felt grounded. The floor beneath her shoes was solid, familiar, real. She could sense the room now in a different way. It was no longer just noise and movement. It was attention, even if that attention was still unsure of her. She stopped where she was meant to stand and waited. No one rushed her. No one spoke to her. For a brief second, it felt as if she was alone, even though the room was full. She welcomed that feeling. It gave her clarity. She looked around, not to search for approval, but to understand the space. Faces were calm, some curious, some distracted. A few people looked away quickly when their eyes met hers, as if unsure whether they should be watching yet. Others watched without expression, already assuming the outcome before it began. She adjusted her stance slightly and placed her hands where they felt most natural. The position was familiar, practiced so many times that her body moved without instruction. This was the part she trusted most. When she stopped thinking and allowed habit to guide her, she always felt free. There was a signal, small and quiet, that it was time to begin. No announcement. No dramatic pause. Just a simple indication that the space was hers now. She acknowledged it with a gentle nod. For a moment, she did nothing. Not out of hesitation, but intention. She let the silence settle. Silence had always been important to her. It created space for what mattered. It allowed people to listen before they realized they were listening. She began exactly as she had been told to. Simple, controlled, nothing extra. The opening was soft and careful, almost modest. It matched what the room expected. Some people relaxed slightly. Believing their assumptions had been correct, she stayed there for a while, letting the simplicity breathe. Each movement was precise, calm, and unhurried. There was no rush to impress. No attempt to surprise. Just honesty in what she was doing. Inside, she felt steady. Her thoughts were quiet. This was the place she reached only after years of practice. A place where doubt faded and focus took over. She was not thinking about the room anymore. She was present, fully and completely. She noticed subtle changes before anyone else did. A slight shift in posture from someone in the front. A head lifting. A pause in quiet conversation. These were small signs, but she recognized them. She had seen them before, she continued, still simple on the surface, but with intention underneath. Each movement flowed into the next with purpose. The ease of it began to stand out, even if the reason was not yet clear. Some people leaned forward without realizing it. Others stopped fidgeting. The room grew still in a way that could not be forced. Attention was forming naturally now, drawn in by something they could feel, but not yet explain. She allowed herself to go deeper, not louder or faster, but more focused. The change was subtle, almost invisible, but it carried weight. It came from years of understanding, not from a desire to show off. She remembered being told many times that people would not notice the details, that they only cared about what was obvious. She had learned that this was not true. People always felt more than they realized. They noticed sincerity, even if they couldn't name it. Her movements became more confident, still calm, still controlled. Nothing dramatic. Nothing excessive. Yet something had shifted. The room felt different now, heavier, more present. She could sense eyes following her hands now. Not out of politeness, but interest. Genuine curiosity had replaced quiet judgment. The simple moment they expected was becoming something else. She did not rush the transition. She let it unfold naturally. Years of patience guided her. She knew exactly when to move forward and when to hold back. This balance had taken a long time to learn. The change became clear. What started as simple now carried depth. What seemed easy now revealed effort hidden beneath calm control. The room could feel it, even if they still didn't understand how or why. Someone in the back straightened suddenly, as if waking from a thought. Another person crossed their arms, no longer relaxed but focused. These reactions were not planned. They were honest. She stayed centered, unaffected by the shift in attention. She had promised herself long ago that she would never perform for approval. She would only perform with truth. That promise guided her now. Her breathing remained steady. Her movements remained clear. Nothing about her expression changed, yet everything around her felt more alive. The contrast was striking. She remembered the quiet nights when she practiced alone, repeating the same sections until they felt natural. She remembered the frustration, the doubt, the moments she almost believed the voices that told her to stay small. Those memories did not weaken her. They strengthened her. They reminded her that what looked effortless now had been earned slowly, honestly. The room was completely silent. Even those who had not planned to pay attention were now fully present. The simple moment they expected had turned into something they could not ignore. She allowed herself one small shift, controlled and intentional. It was not loud. It was not flashy, but it was undeniable. The depth of her ability revealed itself naturally without force. A visible reaction moved through the room. Not shock, not excitement, but realization. The kind that arrives quietly and stays. She remained focused, not on the audience, but on the work itself. That was where her confidence lived. Not in reaction, but in consistency. The instruction to keep it simple echoed again in her mind. But now, it felt fulfilled. She had honored it without limiting herself. She had shown that simplicity could hold strength. As she continued, the room followed her completely. There were no distractions now, no movement. No doubt, she knew she was no longer filling a gap. She was creating a moment. And without changing her expression or breaking her calm, she continued forward. Fully aware that nothing in the room would feel the same after this, the room felt different now. As if the air itself had slowed down to listen. She could sense it without looking up. The quiet was no longer empty. It was full of attention, steady and unbroken. She stayed focused on what she was doing, letting the moment carry itself forward without force. She continued with the same calm control, but the depth beneath it grew clearer with every passing second. What people were seeing now was not a sudden change, but the result of years spent learning how to hold back just enough. The strength had always been there. It was simply revealing itself layer by layer. She noticed how people had stopped shifting in their seats. Hands that once rested casually now stayed still. Eyes followed every movement with care. No one whispered. No one checked anything else. Whatever they had expected before no longer mattered. She remembered a time when she had been told that restraint was a weakness, that if she wanted to be noticed, she needed to be louder, faster, more obvious. She had tried that once, long ago, and it had never felt right. What felt right was this, letting the work speak without asking for permission. The flow continued naturally. Each moment connected to the next with purpose. Nothing felt rushed. Nothing felt held back. She trusted the balance she had built through long experience. She sensed a shift in the front rows first. Expressions softened. Brows lifted slightly. People leaned in, not out of curiosity anymore, but respect. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Respect had replaced assumption. She kept her expression calm, almost neutral. Inside, she felt steady, grounded. There was no rush of pride, no sudden excitement, only a quiet certainty that she was exactly where she needed to be. The simplicity she had been asked to keep had not disappeared. It had transformed. It now carried intention, clarity, and control. The room was beginning to understand that simplicity did not mean lack of depth. It meant confidence. She adjusted her pace slightly, not to show off, but to allow space. Space for people to feel what was happening. Space for the moment to settle. She noticed someone near the side straighten fully, eyes fixed on her. Another person near the back crossed their arms slowly, no longer relaxed, but attentive. These reactions came without planning. They were honest responses to something real. Her thoughts stayed quiet. This was not a time for reflection. It was a time for presence. She had trained herself to remain in this state. Where effort and ease met, she remembered the countless hours spent practicing alone. When no one clapped, no one praised, and no one even knew she was improving. Those hours lived inside her now. They shaped every movement, every decision. The room remained silent, but it was not tense. It was focused, engaged, alive. She allowed the moment to deepen further, revealing more complexity without losing clarity. The control she held was not tight or rigid. It was flexible, responsive, aware. People were no longer watching her to judge. They were watching to understand, to follow. To experience, she felt a quiet connection form. Not personal, not emotional, in an obvious way, but human. A shared attention. A shared pause from everything else. She had been underestimated many times before, But this moment was not about that. It was about honesty, about showing up fully without needing to explain herself. As she continued, a realization moved through the room. It was not sudden or loud. It arrived gently, like a truth finally catching up. The person they thought they were watching was not who they had assumed. She stayed centered, allowing the work to unfold exactly as it needed to. She did not add anything unnecessary. She did not remove anything essential. The contrast became clear. What seemed simple at first now revealed layers of understanding that could only come from experience, from patience, from commitment. She noticed a faint change in the energy near the front. A small nod. A breath held a moment longer than before. These were signs she recognized. Signs of recognition, not surprise. She remembered a conversation from years ago when someone told her that moments like this rarely came to those who waited quietly. She had disagreed then, even if she didn't say it out loud. She believed that waiting was not the same as standing still. She had moved forward every day, even when no one noticed. That movement had brought her here. She allowed the moment to reach its fullest point, not by pushing, but by trusting what she had built. Everything felt aligned now. Her breathing, her focus, her timing. The room followed her completely. No one looked away. No one shifted. It felt as if time itself had paused to listen. She remained calm, grounded, and clear. This was not a performance driven by reaction. It was guided by truth. She felt a quiet sense of completion approaching, though she did not rush toward it. Endings mattered as much as beginnings. She wanted to honor both. She reflected briefly on how often people misunderstood strength. They looked for volume instead of control, speed instead of intention. She had chosen a different path, and this moment proved its value as she continued. The room absorbed everything without resistance. Whatever doubts had existed before were gone now, replaced by understanding. She did not look for applause or approval. She trusted that whatever response came would come naturally. The final stretch approached, and she guided it carefully, with the same attention she had given every part before it. Nothing changed in her expression. Nothing needed to. The space felt full, complete, and still. She sensed that people were already carrying the moment with them, even before it ended. She took one steady breath, staying present until the very last second. She had not broken any instruction. She had not ignored what she was asked to do. She had kept it simple, just not in the way anyone expected. And as the final moment settled into silence, the room remained completely still, fully aware that they had just witnessed something honest, rare, and quietly powerful. The silence after it ended was deep and unbroken. It did not feel awkward or empty. It felt full, as if the room was still holding on to what had just happened. She remained where she was, calm and steady, not rushing to move or look up. She understood that some moments needed time to settle before anything else could follow. People stayed still, almost unsure of how to react. It was not the kind of moment that demanded loud noise right away. It asked for reflection first, for understanding. The shift that had taken place was quiet but complete. She slowly lowered her hands and took one small step back, signaling that she was finished. Only then did movement return to the room. A few breaths were released. Someone shifted in their seat. Another person nodded slowly, as if confirming something to themselves. The response came naturally, without forcing itself. It started softly, then grew. Not rushed, not exaggerated, honest. The sound filled the room, but it did not overwhelm her. She accepted it calmly, with a small nod of acknowledgement. Nothing more. She did not smile widely or search for faces she recognized. She did not look for validation in anyone's eyes. The moment was not about being seen. It was about having spoken honestly through her work. As the noise settled, she stepped aside, as she had been instructed earlier. No one stopped her this time. No one redirected her or reminded her to keep it simple. That instruction no longer applied. It had already been understood. She picked up her bag slowly, feeling its familiar weight again. It reminded her of everything that had brought her here. Every quiet effort, every unseen hour, Every moment of doubt she had worked through alone. People began to speak to one another in low voices. The words were different now, softer, thoughtful, curious. Some glanced toward her as she moved, not with indifference anymore, but recognition. Someone approached her carefully, not with instructions, but with genuine interest. The tone had changed. The distance was gone. She listened politely, responded briefly, and moved on. She did not feel the need to explain herself. The moment had already done that for her. As she walked away from the center, she felt a lightness she had not expected. Not excitement, not pride, relief, the kind that comes from being true to yourself without compromise. She found a quiet place to sit, let everything settle. Her breathing was slow and natural. Her thoughts were calm. The noise of the room faded into the background. She reflected briefly, not on what others thought now, but on how far she had come. There had been times when she doubted whether moments like this would ever arrive. Times when staying patient felt harder than quitting. What she realized now was that the moment itself was never the goal. The goal had always been becoming someone who could stand calmly in it. She thought about the instruction she had been given at the start. Keep it simple. She understood now why it no longer felt limiting. Simplicity had never been the problem. Fear had been. She had learned to remove fear quietly, piece by piece, through steady effort and honesty. That was what people had felt, even if they couldn't explain it. The room slowly returned to its normal rhythm. But something had changed beneath the surface. Conversations carried a different tone. Attention lingered where it hadn't before. She stood when it was time to leave, moving with the same calm presence she had carried throughout the day. No one stopped her path. A few people nodded as she passed. One person offered a simple word of thanks. She accepted it with quiet grace. As she stepped outside, the air felt cooler, clearer. The world beyond the room moved as it always had. Nothing dramatic had changed, and yet everything felt different. She paused for a moment, not to look back, but to take one steady breath. She did not replay the moment in her mind. She did not analyze reactions. She allowed it to rest where it belonged. She understood that moments like this were not endings. They were confirmations. Proof that the path she had chosen, even when it was lonely, had been worth walking. She continued forward, knowing that there would be other rooms, other assumptions, other instructions to stay small, and she would face them the same way she always had. Calmly, honestly, with patience. What mattered most was not that. Others had finally seen her differently. It was that she had never stopped seeing herself clearly. She had kept it simple, just as she was asked. And in doing so, she had shown that simplicity, when built on truth and effort, could leave a lasting impact without ever asking for attention. As she disappeared into the everyday flow of life, the moment she left behind continued quietly, carried by those who witnessed it, reminding them that sometimes the most powerful surprises arrive without noise, without warning, and without needing to be explained. The days that followed moved quietly. Without any dramatic change on the surface, life returned to its usual rhythm. Streets filled, schedules resumed, and people went back to their routines. From the outside, it looked as if nothing important had happened at all, and in many ways that was true. The world did not stop. It rarely does. She returned to her normal life with the same calm presence she had always carried. She woke up early, moved through her day with focus, and spent her time the way she always had. There were no sudden announcements, no grand celebrations, no moment where everything turned upside down. What had changed lived deeper than that. She noticed it first in herself, a quiet steadiness that no longer wavered when she entered new spaces. A calm that did not depend on how others saw her. It was not confidence in the loud sense. It was certainty, the kind that does not need proof. When she practiced now, she did so with the same discipline as before, but without the old weight of doubt. She no longer wondered if her effort mattered. She knew it did. Even if the results remained unseen, there were small signs that the moment she left behind had not disappeared. A message passed along through someone she barely knew. a brief mention in a quiet conversation, an invitation that felt more thoughtful than the ones she had received before. None of it overwhelmed her. She accepted each thing calmly, without rushing toward it. She understood that attention could come and go. What stayed was the work. She thought often about how easily people believed stories they told themselves, how quickly they decided who was capable and who was not. She had been placed into those stories many times before. This time, she had simply stepped outside of one. She did not resent the past assumptions. They had shaped her patience. They had taught her how to listen more than she spoke, how to prepare without needing praise, in quieter moments. She reflected on how close she had come to walking away from this path entirely. There were years when effort felt invisible. Years when staying simple felt like staying stuck. What had kept her going was not hope for recognition, but respect for the craft itself. She remembered a time when she believed that being noticed was the same as being valued. Experience had taught her otherwise. True value came from showing up honestly, whether anyone was watching or not. As weeks passed, she found herself in new rooms, facing new faces. Some recognized her now. Others did not. The difference no longer mattered to her. She entered each space the same way. Calm, observant, ready. When she was given instructions, she listened carefully. Not with fear, not with resistance, but with understanding. She knew how to follow guidance without losing herself. That balance had taken years to learn. There were moments when someone tried to place limits on her again. Moments when expectations were set low, wrapped in polite words. She recognized them instantly. They no longer unsettled her. She followed the instruction when it made sense. She expanded beyond it when truth required more. She trusted herself to know the difference. Sometimes, people asked about her journey. They expected a story filled with dramatic turning points. She answered simply. She spoke of time, of patience, of showing up again and again when it would have been easier to stop. Not everyone understood. Some looked disappointed, as if they wanted struggle to sound louder, success to look faster. She did not try to change their minds. Her life was not a performance. She learned to appreciate the quiet impact of consistency. The way steady effort changed how people responded over time. The way respect formed slowly without demand. One evening, as she practiced alone, she paused and listened to the silence around her. It no longer felt heavy. It felt supportive, like space that allowed her to grow. She realized then that the moment she had experienced was not a peak. It was a reflection, a mirror showing her who she had become. She had learned how to stay simple without staying small, how to be humble without hiding, how to hold strength gently. These lessons did not make her louder. They made her clearer. As time moved forward, opportunities appeared in unexpected ways. Some were small. Some required courage. She chose carefully. She did not rush toward everything that opened. She trusted her sense of timing. She noticed that people listened differently now, even when she spoke less than before. They listened because she did not speak to convince. She spoke to be honest. There were still difficult days. Days when progress felt slow. Days when old doubts tried to return. She met those days with patience, just as she always had. She reminded herself that growth was not a straight line, that even strong foundations needed care. From time to time, she thought about the room where everything had shifted, not with nostalgia, but gratitude. It had given her confirmation, not identity. Her identity had been built long before that day, in quiet rooms, during unseen hours. She moved through the world with a lighter step now, not because life was easier, but because she no longer carried the burden of needing to prove herself. She had learned that simplicity was not about doing less. It was about doing what mattered, with clarity and intention. And as she continued forward, shaping her path one calm step at a time, she carried a quiet truth with her, that sometimes the most meaningful change does not announce itself. It settles in slowly, reshaping how you stand, how you move, and how you trust yourself. The world around her would keep moving, full of noise and quick judgment. She would keep moving too, steady and grounded, guided by the understanding that had taken her years to earn. She had been told to keep it simple. She had done exactly that, and in doing so, she had built a life that did not need to surprise anyone anymore. It only needed to be lived. Months passed, and the memory of that day settled into something steady rather than sharp. It no longer arrived all at once. It appeared in small reminders, quiet moments, and subtle changes in how people responded to her presence. Life continued forward, as it always did. But with a softer rhythm that felt earned, she found herself invited into spaces she once only watched from a distance. The invitations were not dramatic or urgent. They were thoughtful, measured, given without pressure. She appreciated that. It matched the way she lived. In these new spaces, she noticed something interesting. People listened before they spoke. They asked questions instead of giving instructions. They left room for her to decide how much to share and how much to hold back. This shift felt unfamiliar at first, but not uncomfortable. She did not change herself to fit these rooms. She entered them the same way she entered every place, calm, observant, open, but not exposed. There were moments when others tried to place her story into neat categories. They wanted a clear beginning, a dramatic middle, and a perfect ending. She understood why. Stories were easier that way. But her life did not move in straight lines. It moved in circles, pauses, and quiet returns. When she spoke about her journey, she kept it honest and simple. She talked about effort, about time, about learning to trust silence. Some people leaned in closer when she said these things. Others looked confused. She accepted both reactions. She realized that inspiration did not always look like excitement. Sometimes it looked like relief. Relief that it was possible to move forward without becoming someone else. As her days filled with new responsibilities, she stayed mindful of balance. She did not say yes to everything. She did not chase attention just because it was offered. She chose carefully, protecting the calm she had built over years. There were still moments of doubt. They arrived quietly, often when she was tired or alone. She no longer feared them. She had learned that doubt was not an enemy. It was a signal to slow down and reconnect with what mattered. In those moments, she returned to the basics: breathing, practice, patience, the same foundations that had carried her. Through unseen years, she noticed how younger voices watched her now, not with admiration, but curiosity. They were not looking for perfection. They were looking for permission. Permission to move at their own pace. Permission to stay simple without feeling small. She did not position herself as an example. She simply showed up as herself. That seemed to matter more. Occasionally, someone would say they had expected her to be different, louder, more confident in obvious ways. She smiled gently at those comments. Confidence, she had learned, did not need volume. Her work continued to deepen, not because she pushed harder, but because she listened more closely. She paid attention to small details, to timing, to intention. These things shaped her progress far more than speed ever could. One quiet afternoon, she found herself thinking about the version of herself who almost stopped. The one who sat alone, unsure if staying simple meant staying invisible. She felt gratitude for that version, for not giving up. She understood now that visibility was not the same as impact. Some of the most meaningful influence happened quietly, without announcement. People who worked with her noticed her steadiness. When challenges appeared, she did not rush to react. She paused, listened, and responded with clarity. This approach changed the energy of entire rooms. She saw how calm could be contagious as time went on. The idea of surprise faded from her story. People no longer spoke about what she had done as unexpected. They spoke about it as natural, as if it had always made sense. This shift felt right to her. She did not want to be known for one moment. She wanted to be trusted over time. There were days when she stepped back intentionally, allowing others to move forward. She believed in shared space, not competition. She knew how powerful encouragement could be, especially when it came without comparison. She continued learning, always. From people younger than her, from those with different experiences, from silence itself. One evening, as she walked home under a quiet sky, she felt a deep sense of alignment. Not happiness in a loud way, but peace, the kind that comes from living in agreement with yourself. She understood that the instruction to keep it simple had followed her far beyond that one room. It had become a principle she lived by, not as a limit, but as a guide. Keep what matters. Release what doesn't. Move with intention. The world around her remained unpredictable. Opinions shifted. Trends changed. She stayed grounded, knowing that none of that defined her work or her worth. She no longer measured success by reaction or recognition. She measured it by consistency, by integrity, by how she felt at the end of the day as she continued forward. She carried with her a quiet confidence that did not seek attention. It simply existed. The surprise that once defined her story had transformed into trust. Trust in her ability. Trust in her pace. Trust in the value of staying true to herself. And as life unfolded in its own imperfect way, she kept moving, steady and clear, proving without words that sometimes the most powerful journeys are the ones that never need to announce themselves at all.